The ceremony, carved in starlight before the first breath of dawn touches the horizon, before the sky remembers its own color. There is a moment when the world holds perfectly still. It is in that trembling pause between night and morning that the ancient plateau reveals itself. A wide, silent expanse of stone laid out like an open prayer to the heavens. If one listens closely, it is said, the ground carries a faint hum as though echoing a memory far older than the mountains that cradle it. Here, the stones align with the slow-turning heavens. Not by accident, not by the wandering hand of nature, but by intention. Deliberate, patient, sacred. Their placement follows patterns so subtle that only the most attentive gaze can sense their purpose. They form spirals, rings, and long straight lines pointing toward constellations that move with the deep breath of the cosmos. Some believe this plateau was a threshold, a place where the sky descended to touch the earth, where the ancient ones could speak to the stars not with words, but with devotion. Others whisper that it was a cradle of ceremony, a chamber open to the wind, where a people once bound themselves to the drifting constellations above. And so our story begins not with loud discovery, but with a question that drifts across the dust like a soft breeze. Why did an entire civilization build their identity around the sky's quiet breath? In forgotten corners of the earth, elders tell of a time when the people who lived here, their name now lost to silence, believed they were the children of starlight. They looked upward, not merely for guidance, but for remembrance. The sky, to them, was not a distant tapestry of burning suns, but a living map of origins. A place where ancestors swam through the dark like luminous fish, watching over those who remained on earth. It is said that on nights when the air was especially still, wandering priests would gather on this plateau. They wore robes woven with powdered minerals that shimmered faintly under the moon. Their steps were slow, deliberate, echoing the measured rotation of the sky. Each footfall was a note in a silent song, a rhythm meant to match the turning of the constellations. Some walked in spirals, following stone paths carved to mimic the celestial currents above. Others traced long, narrow routes that aligned with star paths known only to their order. Invisible highways of light crossing the heavens, in patterns no modern chart can fully explain. They carried small lanterns, made from hollowed stones filled with glowing resin, imitating the soft pulse of distant stars. Their rituals were not spectacles. There were no grand fires, no drums, no declarations shouted into the wind. Instead, everything unfolded in whispers and slow gestures, as though every movement might disturb a delicate covenant between earth and sky. At the plateau's center lay what many believe was the heart of their devotion. A smooth circular stone, polished by centuries of prayer. Beneath it, myth says, was buried a crystal shard said to have fallen from the heavens. Priests would kneel around this stone, their hands resting lightly upon its surface, feeling for the faint vibrations that rose from the earth like a distant heartbeat. Whispers tell us that this vibration was believed to be the breath of the celestial mothers, the divine beings who guided the turning of the sky. Each constellation, they said, was a fragment of these mothers' stories, inscribed across the night in delicate strokes of light. And the people who gathered here were bound to those stories, woven into them like threads in a cosmic tapestry. The elders spoke of one constellation in particular, a shape resembling an outstretched hand reaching toward the east. This was the symbol of the First Mother, the one whose pulse could be felt through the stone. When comets streaked across her outstretched fingers, the priests interpreted it as sacred scripture, messages written in bright, momentary fire. Nights when such comets appeared were nights of ceremony, when the plateau glowed with dozens of small lanterns shimmering like a constellation mirrored on Earth. Wandering through these stories, we begin to sense that the ritual performed here was not designed to mark time as we understand it. It did not celebrate harvests or solstices alone. Instead, it said it forged belonging. A belonging not to a king, not to a land, but to the sky itself. The people believed themselves part of an eternal family of light, a lineage stretching beyond mortality into the swirling banks of stars. As we walk deeper into this imagined memory, the plateau shifts from stone to symbol. Every carved groove, every aligned boulder becomes a quiet reminder of a worldview that saw the universe not as a cold expanse, but as a living companion. It is said that when the priests finished their slow spiraled procession, they gathered at the plateau's highest edge. There, in silence, they lifted their lanterns toward the sky. The faint glow trembled against the morning wind, blending with the first dim glimmer of dawn. They believed that their light, however small, was returned by the heavens, that every star shimmered a little brighter in response. Some myths suggest that this exchange of light was their way of reaffirming connection, a ritual of presence and acknowledgement. The heavens recognized them, and they recognized the heavens. It was a bridge between bone and infinity, fragile yet enduring. Ancient inscriptions found on scattered stones hint at this belief. Though eroded by centuries, they speak of alignment, not merely physical, but spiritual. They describe a returning, a cycle wherein human souls drifted upward like smoke upon death, becoming part of the constellations that once guided their earthly paths. Other inscriptions speak of listening, of placing one's ear against the stone during still nights to hear the whispers of those who had already joined the sky. One particularly weathered carving shows a spiral rising into a field of star-like dots. Some interpret this as a depiction of the ceremony itself, a visual poem expressing the movement from earthbound life into celestial belonging. Beneath the spiral, faint words survive, marked by the moon, perhaps indicating that these rituals followed lunar rhythms rather than solar ones. Where modern calendars chase the sun, these people followed the night's quiet pulse. As we wander gently through this landscape of memory, certain contradictions shimmer at the edges. Archaeologists debate whether the plateau truly aligned with constellations, or whether later storytellers shaped the narrative. Some argue that the patterns of stones may have served more practical purposes, territorial markers or gathering sites, but such academic considerations feel pale in comparison to the myths surrounding this sacred space. For in myth, truth is not always literal. It breathes through symbols, moving like a soft wind between what is known and what is felt. And as we listen more closely, beneath the silence, we sense something delicate, the lingering presence of ceremony, not as a finished act, but as an echo, a resonance that refuses to fade. Perhaps it clings to the stones themselves, held in the small cavities where dust settles, or drifts across the plateau on gentle morning breezes, waiting for those who move slowly enough to hear. Some travelers who have stood upon this plateau at dawn describe a strange feeling, a sense that the air thickens, becoming almost luminous, that shadows fall in unfamiliar angles, as though following celestial patterns rather than earthly geometry. Others report hearing a faint ringing sound, like distant chimes carried on the wind. Scientists attribute such impressions to temperature shifts, atmospheric acoustics. But listeners of old believe these are fragments of the ceremony, remnants of the ancient ritual still echoing beneath the turning sky. And perhaps they are right, for there are places in this world where the past does not vanish. It lingers, folded into the breath of the land, waiting for moments when silence grows deep enough for memory to rise. As the chapter draws toward its gentle close, the sky begins to brighten. The stars retreat, slowly dissolving into the soft hues of morning. The stones, once glowing faintly under starlight, now appear muted, weathered, ordinary. But this ordinariness is a veil. Beneath it lies centuries of devotion, countless nights of whispered prayers offered to the heavens. Where memory fades, something softer takes its place. Not knowledge, not certainty, but a feeling that hums within the quiet. A sense that the ceremony, though forgotten by name and practice, still breathes through the earth. That somewhere in the deep silence of dawn, the constellations remember those who once honored them. And so we leave the plateau not with answers, but with stillness. A stillness shaped like a question, lingering just beyond reach. Perhaps the ancient ritual was never meant to be rediscovered fully. Perhaps it lives best in this fragile echo, suspended between dust and starlight. Perhaps the sky still waits for those who know how to listen. The tablets hidden beneath the midnight sand. It is said that on certain nights, when the desert exhales its long, cool breath across the sleeping earth, the dunes stir like restless thoughts. Grains of sand slide in soft murmurs, shaping and reshaping the landscape with gestures so gentle they feel almost deliberate. And on one such night, under a moon hung low as an ancient lantern, something that had slept for centuries rose half an inch closer to the world of the living. A slab of stone, no larger than a pilgrim's chest, rested at an angle beneath the drifting sands. Only a corner was visible, just enough for the moonlight to fall upon a single carved symbol. It shimmered faintly, though the air was still. Some believe the desert remembers what the world forgets, holding its secrets not with cruelty, but with the patience of eternity. And there, in that lonely stretch of shifting silence, the stones seemed to pulse softly, as if waking from a long, dreamless night. This is where our wandering begins. Beneath the silence of the open dunes, beneath the moon's cool watch and the echo of forgotten footsteps, lies an archive whispered of only in fragments. A hidden record of the old desert tribes called the Tablets of the Midnight Sand. Whispers tell us these tablets were not merely etched with words. They were impressions of vows made between people and sky, between dust and the great celestial dome that bends above it. They were said to hold stories not of kings or queens, but of stargazers, mystics, and keepers who believed the heavens spoke in patterns of wind and shadow. Tonight, we follow the faint glimmer of that half-hidden stone, as if it were a lantern guiding us into a world where memory itself was considered sacred. Somewhere beyond this first fragment, more tablets lie concealed. Some whole, some crumbled into sleepy ruin. They rest in chambers carved, not of brick or timber, but of sand hardened by ritual and time. To reach them, one must listen more than see. For the desert seldom reveals anything to those who rush, and every revelation arrives like the slow blossoming of dawn. And so, imagine stepping closer now. The moonlight grazes the tablet's corner, revealing the curve of a symbol shaped like a spiral touched by starlight. It is the mark of the celestial covenant, an emblem some scribes believed appeared only when the heavens approved of a message. There are tales, soft, drifting tales, that such symbols would dim or brighten depending on the sincerity of the one who chiseled them. Whether this is truth or poetry, the desert does not clarify. Kneeling beside the stone, brushing away the sand in gentle strokes, we notice how the tablet seems less like an artifact and more like a breath that paused mid-whisper. Lines curl and unfurl across the surface, carrying meanings that feel both ancient and strangely alive. In forgotten corners of the world, there were once scribes who believed knowledge was not something to own, but something that visited. It arrived like a passing wind or a drifting constellation. Sensed, understood, captured for a moment, and then allowed to disappear again. To them, writing was not a method of preservation, but an offering. Words were carved with humility, knowing that even stone could one day choose to forget. Here, under the moon and the slow rhythm of the desert wind, that belief becomes almost tangible. Perhaps the tablet before us remembers those hands, the careful, reverent ones that chiseled each line beneath starlit skies, not so different from this one. Perhaps the stone carries their lingering warmth, the imprint of their devotion. Or perhaps the desert has softened it too much, rounding the edges of their craft until everything feels like a memory fading as it is recalled. The scribes of this region, so the legends say, were guardians of a celestial lineage. Not bloodline, not dynasty, but a lineage of listening. They believed the stars were messengers, each constellation a chapter, each wandering comet a footnote carried on fire. And when the sky spoke, through omens, through silence, through the shimmer of heat above dunes, they recorded its size upon tablets, like the one before us now. A breath of wind slides across the sand. Something loosens. More of the tablet emerges, as if the desert itself has decided we may see just a little more tonight. And so, we press deeper into the mystery, not with force, but with the slow, respectful patience the desert demands. Behind us lies the world of certainty. Before us lies a landscape where truth wears the robes of myth, where boundaries between story and memory dissolve like dunes shifting under moonlight. Whispers tell us that these tablets once documented covenants, agreements between mortals and the sky, not bargains, not demands, but promises whispered into the night, asking the stars to watch over journeys, births, harvests, and departures. Some symbols mark gratitude, others mark grief. Some resemble spirals, others resemble falling grains of sand, and still others look like shattered constellations. Yet among the tablets, contradictions ripple like mirages. Some inscriptions speak of emergence, of new civilizations rising like dawn. Others speak of dissolution, of cities returning to dust, of people who believe departure was not an ending, but a return to the great breath from which all stories begin. Scholars who once glimpsed these tablets argued endlessly over their meanings, though none ever stayed long enough for the desert to reveal more than fragments. It is said the desert tests the sincerity of those who study it. Too much ambition, and it buries what you seek. Too much fear, and it reveals nothing. But if one walks with humility, slowly, softly, letting each discovery breathe, then a path sometimes forms where none existed before. And on this imagined path, beneath scattered starlight, we continue wandering. The dunes shift subtly, opening a trail that leads toward a cluster of low, sand-worn stones. They appear like the ribs of an ancient creature half buried in time. These stones mark the edge of what might once have been an archive. Not a building with grandeurs or tall columns, but a meditation chamber carved by intention rather than architecture. Inside, if one can call this slow, curved hollow inside, rests another tablet. This one is cracked, the fissure running diagonally like a lightning mark frozen in mid-strike. Its two halves remain close, but no longer perfectly aligned, as though the desert tried to separate them, but changed its mind. The symbols on this broken tablet are different, larger, more urgent. They seem almost alive in the moonlight, shimmering with an unsteady glow. Spirals give way to lines that resemble the paths of wandering stars. Unpredictable, jagged, yet purposeful. Some inscriptions speak of unification beneath a night sky, where all constellations converge. Others describe dispersal, scattering, and the quiet acceptance of endings. Perhaps this tablet held prophecies, or perhaps it held warnings. But if so, they were not carved with fear. The strokes are gentle, patient, as though whoever etched them understood that destiny moves with the slowness of celestial drift. Unavoidable, yet never rushed. We linger here for a while, listening to the silence. The desert responds, not with answers, but with stillness. A stillness deep enough to feel sacred. A stillness that suggests the tablets were never meant to be instructions or commands, but invitations. Invitations to contemplate one's place beneath a vast, indifferent, yet strangely compassionate sky. Where memory fades, the desert speaks in echoes. And as we sit with these broken inscriptions, as moonlight glides across the sand like a soft hand brushing an old manuscript, we begin to sense that these contradictions, emergence and dissolution, unity and departure, were never meant to be resolved. They are simply the breath in and the breath out of existence. Just as dunes form, drift, collapse, and form again. Just as stars are born, burn, dim, and fall. Just as stories emerge, are cherished, then return to silence. Another breeze rises, the sand shifts again. A third tablet reveals itself, smaller, more refined, and nearly completely intact. Its symbols are softer, more circular, like waves folding into one another. This tablet feels peaceful, as though it carries the promise of continuity rather than warning. Its central symbol resembles an eye closed in meditation. Surrounding it are spirals, not sharp or jagged, but gentle, flowing, oceanic, despite the absence of water for miles. Perhaps this was the tablet carried by wanderers seeking guidance. Perhaps it was meant to remind them that endings were merely thresholds, gateways into new forms of remembrance. Marked by the moon, the symbols glow faintly. Only for a moment, only just enough to suggest awareness, and then they fade again. Whispers tell us that some histories choose their listeners, that knowledge, like wind, moves where it wishes and lingers only with those who approach it, without possession in their hearts. The desert, in its infinite patience, keeps what memory can bear. No more, no less. Tonight, in this suspended quiet, as grains of sand slip through the fingers of time with unhurried grace, we sense the truth of that old saying. Perhaps these tablets were never lost. Perhaps they were always meant to drift in and out of view, like constellations veiled by passing clouds. Perhaps the people who carved them understood that some wisdom must remain partial, glimpsed, not held, felt, not dissected. And as the night deepens, as the moon tilts westward, and its silver glow softens into something almost warm, we step back from the tablet cluster. Slowly, reverently, the dunes begin to reclaim their shapes, smoothing over our footprints, reshaping the landscape as though gently closing a book. Soon, the first tablet will sink once more beneath the sand. The crack in the second will be softened by time. The eye-shaped symbol on the third will drift into shadow, waiting for another night, another wanderer, another moment of quiet awe. And we too drift into stillness. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps it wished only to be touched by moonlight once more, before returning to its long sleep beneath the midnight sand. As you breathe with the rhythm of the desert, slow, deep, unhurried, the silence settles around you like a soft cloak, and somewhere in that hush, in the places where story and dream intertwine, a whisper lingers. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and the desert keeps only what the heart can hold. The chamber where echoes counted the seasons in the deep hours of night, when the world softens and the mind grows lantern-lit and quiet. Let us wander toward a place rarely spoken of, a place carved beneath the oldest cliffs of a land that has no name in any surviving tongue. It is said that somewhere beyond the dunes, beyond the ruined pathways where wind drags its long veil of dust, there lies a hidden chamber where echoes once counted the seasons. Those who searched for it claimed they first heard the chamber before they ever saw it. A sigh caught on the wind, a tremor that felt less like sound and more like the memory of sound. Imagine approaching such a place. The cliffs loom like ancient guardians, their surfaces etched with faded grooves that seem almost deliberate. At their base, half concealed by shadow, is a narrow passageway, a stone throat leading downward, and as you step inside, the air cools, the light dims, and the world you know begins to lift away. as though you are being escorted gently into the underworld of an old dream. No one alive remembers the people who carved this hall. Their name dissolved long ago, scattered in desert storms and eroded scripts. All that remains is the vault itself, cavernous, silent, breathing faintly with the shifting temperatures of the stone around it. Some believe this place was never meant to be entered by many. Perhaps it was intended for a single listener at a time, a solitary traveler who wished to converse with the deeper rhythms of the earth. As you descend into the chamber, the walls flare outward, forming an immense dome supported by pillars that resemble petrified waves. The stone here feels different, smooth as if polished not by tools, but by centuries of passing vibrations. Torches no longer burn in this place, yet one imagines how their flicker might once have danced across the arches, casting long trembling shadows that swayed with every breath of the air. This is where the story begins, in a space so quiet that silence becomes a presence of its own. A companion, a guide, a keeper of truths too fragile for daylight. Whispers tell us that the chamber was once a sacred calendar, not a calendar written in symbols or numbers, but one carved into the nature of sound itself. A single voice could rise within these walls, and the walls would answer. The returning echo, shaped by humidity, by temperature, by the shifting seasons outside, changed subtly from month to month, from moon to moon. It was not the volume that changed, but the timbre, the faint breathiness of winter, the deep resonance of summer, the trembling hush of approaching rain. To these ancient listeners, time was not counted by markings or stones. It was felt, heard, breathed. The earth, they believed, exhaled differently as the world turned, and the chamber captured those exhalations with a delicate precision. Some say priests once gathered here in the dim light before dawn, each robed in woven fibers dyed with minerals from the cliffs above, but they did not chant, nor did they pray in the way we understand prayer. Instead, they stood perfectly still, hands folded, eyes half closed, waiting for the stone to speak. They released a single sound, a hum, a whisper, a syllable so ancient that no modern language holds its meaning. Then they waited for the world to return it, and return it did. The chamber answered every tone with its own shifting voice. On some mornings, it returned as an elongated sigh. On others, as a sharp flutter that hinted at distant storms. During certain celestial alignments, when the moon bent low, or when far constellations crossed their sacred paths, the echo came back in harmonics, unlike anything heard in the open air, as though the chamber momentarily touched another realm. It is said that during the equinox, when light balanced itself between day and night, a whisper cast into the chamber would return in 3 distinct pulses, one for the season passing, one for the season arriving, and one for the invisible seam between them. Listeners believed this was the breath of the world, marking transitions not with clear statements, but with gentle reminders. In forgotten corners of the earth, other ruins repeat this idea in their own quiet ways. Stone circles aligned to winds, river caves tuned to tides, mountain hollows that respond to moonlit snowfall. But none are spoken of with the reverence granted to this chamber beneath the cliffs. For here, it was believed, the world not only echoed but remembered. Legends tell of a gathering known only as the Night of Returning Voices. It came once every cycle of 13 moons. On that night, as lamps flickered along the passages, the community entered the chamber in small groups. They carried no offerings, no carved icons. Instead, each person brought a memory, a story of their year, a moment of joy, of sorrow, of change. One by one, they whispered these memories into the darkness, trusting the stone to hold them. Those echoes, softened by time, became the stories of the land itself. And the people believed that the chamber absorbed not just sound, but emotion, holding every whisper in layers, like rings inside a tree. To walk into the hall after such a night must have felt like stepping into a tapestry woven from human breath, woven from lived moments suspended in the air. But stories fade, as all things do. The people who honored the chamber drifted away, perhaps drawn toward water in a season of drought, perhaps scattered by slow-moving sands. Or perhaps, some say, they simply followed the echoes themselves, interpreting them as a call to journey elsewhere. The chamber remained, quiet and faithful, waiting for voices that no longer came. Even now, if you imagine yourself standing at there, you might feel the lingering presence of those long-gone listeners. The stone beneath your feet is cool and subtly curved, shaped to gather sound toward the center. The air carries a faint mineral scent, like old rain trapped in rock. If you breathe deeply, the silence seems to expand, filling your lungs, calming your pulse. Some explorers claim they have spoken into the chamber, only to hear their words return, altered in uncanny ways. Stretched, softened, transformed, as though filtered through centuries of memories, not their own. One traveler said the echo sounded like a voice wearing the dust of time. Another described it as a distant heartbeat. None could fully explain what they heard, only that the chamber seemed alive, listening with patient intelligence. Perhaps that is why the legends persist. The idea that stone can remember, that echoes can outlive their makers, that silence itself can hold wisdom. Beneath the silence, one might sense that the chamber never truly ended its ancient work. Even without human voices, the world continues to breathe. Winds shifting through the cracked entrance, rains dripping faintly from the ceiling after distant storms, the subtle trembling of the earth during far-off quakes. Each sound enters the hall, brushes the stone, and leaves its trace. A perpetual conversation in which the world speaks softly to itself. Some believe that on certain nights, when the moon is thin and the desert cold, if you place your ear against the pillars, you can hear faint murmurings. Not supernatural, not ghostly, but simply the echoes of long-forgotten days rising within the stone. A reminder that time is not only something we measure, it is something that gathers around us, settles within us, and lingers long after the moment passes. In this way, the chamber becomes more than a relic. It becomes a metaphor for all the places where our own memories dwell. The quiet corners of the heart where stories echo long after their telling, shifting in tone with the seasons of our lives. Just as the ancient priests listened for the return of their whispers, so too do we listen for the echoes of our own past. A voice from childhood, a moment of clarity, a lesson learned beneath a heavy sky. Perhaps that is why this place still draws the curious, even if only in imagination. It represents a world that listened carefully, that found meaning in the softest tremor. that believed time revealed itself not through numbers but through echoes. A world where measurement was a form of reverence and silence was a sacred language. As we drift toward the end of this journey, let the imagery soften. Let the chamber's edges blur like stone dissolving into mist. Let the pillars fade into silhouettes. Let the darkness become a gentle cradle rather than a void. Some say that places of great listening never fall entirely silent. They continue their work long after footsteps have vanished. And so, deep within those cliffs, beyond the reach of wind-scoured trails, the chamber still waits. A patient heart beating in stone. Perhaps its echoes are still counting the seasons. Perhaps your breath, quiet as it is now, would awaken old harmonics long asleep. Or perhaps the chamber is content simply to exist, whispering to itself in rhythms only the earth understands. And as sleep nears, you might imagine that somewhere in the hollows of forgotten mountains, a single echo continues to drift through the dark. Faint, faithful, unchanged. A reminder that even the softest voice leaves an imprint, and even the quietest moment finds a way to return. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. The moonlit gate of the wanderers under a silver sky, where the night drifts like a great unbroken sigh across the sleeping earth. An ancient gate stands alone on a quiet grassy plain. It rises not with the pride of a monument, nor with the sharp edges of a fortress, but with the softened dignity of something that has waited far longer than any living memory. Its stones are pale, almost luminescent, as though they have absorbed centuries of moonlight and hold it gently beneath their surface. And in the cool hush of this evening, the gate seems less like an object and more like a question whispered into the open fields. It is said that long ago, when the world was quieter and the night sky carried meanings now forgotten, this solitary arch marked a passage meant only for those who understood the language of shadows. Some believe it was built for the living, those who wandered the plains with open hearts, searching for a place where the earth's breath met the sky's unfolding dreams. Others insist it was shaped for the spirits alone, a threshold where the invisible could step across the veil without disturbing the grass beneath their feet. And still others say that the answer lies somewhere in between, in a place where certainty fades and wonder begins. Tonight, beneath the slow descent of moonlight, that question lingers with a soft and ancient patience. Was this gate meant for those who breathe, or those who drift? For those who walk, or those who hover between worlds? The wind offers no answer. It moves across the plain with a tender hand, brushing the long grass in gentle waves, as if reminding us that some truths can only be approached when we quiet ourselves enough to listen. As you step closer, the gate's carvings begin to reveal themselves, timidly at first, like shy memories resurfacing from childhood. Delicate lines snake along the stone, almost too faint to notice, depicting footprints arranged in a slow arc. not in a straight march, nor in the confident path of a traveler with a destination, but in a curved, spiraling dance. Footsteps following the curve of the moon. A patient crescent journey, as if the ancient artists were trying to say, the path is not forward, but upward, inward, cyclical. Whispers tell us that a people once lived in these plains, wanderers of the night, dreamers of lunar truths. They did not follow roads or trails. They followed phases of light. They walked when the moon called them, when the sky unfurled its silver banner and lit the ground in a soft, holy glow. Some called them the quiet ones, for no cry of battle, no clang of metal, no shouts of labor marked their presence. They moved like breath, invisible until illuminated by the moon. It is said they believed each lunar phase opened a different passage in the world. One for reflection, one for healing, one for remembrance, and one for release. And when the full moon rose at its highest, they gathered around this gate, setting down small offerings of river stones, pressed herbs, and pieces of woven thread. For them, this arch was not a barrier, but a meeting place, a silent promise between heaven and earth. Now, as we drift deeper into this night-soaked scene, the air grows softer, full of the scent of grass warmed by the day's fading heat. The field around you shimmers faintly, as if the boundary between waking and dreaming has begun to dissolve. Shapes blur, distances soften, and even the horizon seems to sigh into the mist. The longer you stand before the gate, the clearer it becomes that this place does not wish to tell its story quickly. Like the moon it honors, it prefers slow cycles and quiet revelations. Look again at the carvings. The footsteps do not progress in a single direction. They circle, return, pause, weave, and ascend. Between them, faint symbols appear, small spirals representing breath, tiny crescent shapes symbolizing the passing of seasons, and delicate lines suggesting the flow of unseen waters. Some have interpreted these as maps of sacred ceremonies. Others think they are prayers, and a few believe they are dreams carved into stone, preserved so that even when their creators faded into time's long shadow, their intentions would still shimmer under moonlight. In forgotten corners of the earth, places like this still linger, sites where the world feels thinner, more tender, more receptive to whispers. This grassy plain is one of them. And if you stand still long enough, allowing the night to settle around you, you may notice the faint hum that rises from the ground, as though the earth itself remembers the footsteps of those who once moved here with reverence. Some scholars speak of this gate as a border, a marker between the dwellings of the everyday and territories reserved for ceremony. But that explanation, though logical, feels too small for the atmosphere that surrounds this place. The air here is too sacred, the silence too deep, the moon's glow too purposeful. Perhaps the gate marked something less physical. Perhaps it marked a shift in the soul. In ancient traditions, transitions were never taken lightly. To step from one state of being to another was to cross a threshold as real and as holy as any carved in stone. This gate, then, may have been a symbol of that transition, a reminder that all journeys, whether across plains or within one's own heart, require a moment of stillness before the crossing. Imagine the wanderers here on a night like this, gathered around the arch, wrapped in soft cloaks smelling of smoke and wild herbs, faces lifted to the moon, breathing in slow unison, as though syncing themselves with the rhythm of the sky. Some believe they stood in silence to let their worries drift upward like dust on a soft breeze. Others think they sought guidance from the moon's reflected wisdom, and some imagine they simply gathered to remember their ancestors, letting memory settle like dew on the grass around them. But whatever their purpose, one thing seems certain. They approached this place not with haste, but with humility. And perhaps that is why the gate still stands. Because humility ages slower than ambition. Because reverence leaves fewer scars on stone than conquest. As the night deepens, the sky darkens into a vast well of stars. The moon climbs higher, bathing the gate in a glow so gentle it feels almost alive. The silver light pulls within the arch's inner curve, illuminating the faint dust that drifts through the air. The gate, once silent and still, now seems to breathe with a slow, quiet pulse. Look closely. The moonlight does not simply strike the stone. It gathers within it, as though the arch were built to cradle this glow. As if, on nights like this, it remembers its purpose. Some say that if you stand precisely at the center of the arch during the full moon, you will feel a subtle shift beneath your feet, an almost imperceptible tremor, like the soft exhale of something waking far below the Earth's surface. Others whisper that at such moments, the air thickens, time loosens, and forgotten voices stir among the grasses. But no one claims certainty. This place is not for certainty. It is for wonder. And wonder does not shout. It only listens. Beneath the silence, beneath the cool glow, you may sense that the gate is offering something. Not an answer, but a presence. A reassurance that some mysteries exist not to be solved, but to be honored. Perhaps this gate was never meant to lead anywhere beyond itself. Perhaps the journey it offers is inward. Perhaps its true purpose is simply to invite stillness. As the moonlight strengthens, the carvings shimmer faintly. The spirals brightening, the crescents softening, the footsteps almost appearing to move with the slow rhythm of the night breeze. The entire arch becomes a painting of movement hidden within stillness. And in this gentle illumination, a truth almost emerges. Not spoken, not carved, but felt. Some journeys are meant to be taken only in silence. There are passages we cross not with footsteps, but with breath. There are thresholds that reveal themselves only when we are quiet enough to hear them. And there are gates, lonely, moonlit, eternal, that remind us that every traveler carries two worlds, the one beneath their feet and the one within their heart. The night deepens once more. The wind calms. The grasses settle. And the moon, steady and luminous, gazes through the arch like an ancient eye. When sleep begins to gather behind your thoughts, you may find yourself standing before this gate once again. Its stones cool beneath your fingertips, its carvings soft and murmuring. And as your eyes grow heavy, let the silver glow lead you inward, into the resting spaces of your own mind. For here, under this moonlit arch, nothing demands, nothing insists. Everything simply invites. And in that invitation, in that gentle question, suspended in the stillness of night, the chapter fades, softly, quietly, into silence. Codex of Breath and Flame. In the dim hush of a forgotten shrine, where dust drifts like ancient snow and stone walls remember the warmth of hands long vanished, an old manuscript rests upon a narrow altar of veined obsidian. It lies open as though waiting, as though it has been listening to centuries pass and has finally exhaled. The surface of its pages rises and falls with the faintest breath of the room, as if the codex itself were alive, as if some lingering spirit were turning invisibly in its sleep. A single candle burns beside it, its light thin and trembling, casting a soft golden glow that slides across the sacred fibers of the pages. It is said that these fibers were taken from a plant that grows only in the shadow of a volcanic stone, a plant watered by warm winds, rising from the deep breath of the earth. When woven together, the strands create paper that whisper when touched, paper that seems always on the verge of speech. Upon this fragile surface, symbols shimmer, not with movement, but with suggestion. Shapes that resemble the curl of breath on a winter morning. Lines shaped like flames caught in mid-dance. Spirals marking the rising of stars. This is the Codex of Breath and Flame, a relic that scholars have sought, doubted, lost, and rediscovered across the turning of ages. Now it sits before us, quiet yet somehow vast, like a doorway made of ink and light. Some believe the Codex was never meant to be read quickly. Its creators, they say, understood breath as a sacred gesture, a bridge between the mortal and the celestial. And so, each symbol is to be approached the way one approaches dawn, slowly, without haste, allowing the meaning to rise in its own time. In forgotten corners of the earth, where the old faiths still linger in abandoned temples and overgrown cloisters, it is whispered that one must inhale gently before reading a passage, and exhale as the truth unfurls. Only then does the manuscript reveal its rhythm. The teachings woven through its pages speak of a world built upon cycles of inhalation and radiance. Fire, in these passages, is not the devouring force we know, not the destroyer of wood and rope and fragile memory. Here, fire is cleansing, an inner torch that illuminates the hidden chambers of the heart. Breath is not merely the gathering of air, but a subtle essence, a shimmering thread that ties humankind to the quiet architecture of the heavens. It is said that ancient devotees believed each living being carried a small ember in the chest, placed there by the first celestial flame at the dawn of ages. With each inhalation, the ember brightened. With each exhalation, it whispered its warmth back into the world. One learned to live by the rise and fall of that inner glow. And in their rituals, breath was not taken but shared. A gift passing between earth and sky through the fragile human vessel. Whispers tell us of the flame bearers, those elusive figures who appear again and again in the Codex's chapters. Their names have long since crumbled, but their presence endures like silhouettes painted on the underside of clouds. They were observers of the night sky, interpreters of the subtle flickers that ripple between one star and the next. Through practiced breaths, slow, measured, deep as tides, they aligned themselves with celestial rhythms, believing each inhalation allowed a small part of the universe to settle gently within them. Some traditions say these flame bearers would gather on mountaintops where the air was thin and chilled. There, wrapped in robes, dark as cooled embers, they would sit for hours, unmoving except for the rise of their shoulders with each breath. As they inhaled, constellations seemed to draw near. As they exhaled, warm light spread beneath their skin. They watched the heavens not with eyes alone, but with lungs, with the quiet pulse of their ribs, with the steady burn of their inner flame. But the Codex is not without its shadows. Beneath the smooth lines of its teachings, beneath the elegance of its patterns, contradictions lie buried like roots twisting beneath ancient stone. Some pages seem older than others, their ink faded into near invisibility. Others gleam with newer strokes, symbols sharpened by a different hand. Certain passages repeat themselves, but with small changes, like a story told by many tongues across generations, each adding a layer of meaning or confusion. It is believed that the manuscript was rewritten many times, perhaps copied by scribes who revered it, perhaps altered by those who sought to guide its message in a new direction. Each layer rests atop the last, like sediment on the floor of an old sea. And so, when the candlelight slides across the page, one might see a faint ghost of an earlier symbol beneath the newer one, as if the past and present have both claimed the same sacred space. Where memory fades, interpretation begins. Some scholars say the Codex contradictions are not mistakes, but part of its essence. Breath changes as it moves through the body. Flame shifts as it meets air. Stars alter their paths across millennia. Perhaps knowledge, too, was meant to flicker, to glow, to dim, to return with new colors. As the flame bearers once taught, no truth is entirely still. It expands and contracts like a living lung. There is a passage whispered among those who have studied the Codex by candlelight, a passage found near the manuscript's worn center. It speaks of a ritual performed once each decade, beneath a moon marked by a faint halo. On that night, the flame bearers are said to have gathered in a deep stone chamber lit only by the soft glow of torches pressed into the walls. They sat in a circle around a single bowl of water, so still it mirrored the stars painted on the ceiling above. With each breath, they warmed the water, though no hands touched it. As they inhaled, the bowl remained calm. As they exhaled, small ripples stirred across its surface, shimmering like distant galaxies caught in motion. It was believed that through this ritual, they could glimpse the secret movements of time. The slow turning of eras, the rise and fall of forgotten civilizations, the thin line between what burns and what endures. Some say the ritual never occurred. Others insist it continues even now, in hidden sanctuaries carved into the earth. The Codex offers no answer. It simply rests on its altar, letting its symbols murmur their layered truths to any who linger long enough to hear. The deeper one reads, the softer the manuscript becomes, as though the words settle gradually into the quiet of the room. The Codex does not demand understanding. It invites presence. It invites the listener to breathe, to let the rhythm of the lines move through them, like wind through a forest of stone pillars. There are moments when the candlelight flickers, and suddenly a symbol seems to shift, or a shadow falls in such a way that a hidden meaning almost appears. Almost, but not quite. Then the page returns to stillness, and we are left wondering if we imagined the change, or if the manuscript briefly stirred. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Near the end of the Codex, the pages grow thinner, almost translucent. Here, the teachings turn inward, speaking not of celestial motions, but of the silent ember within the reader. The text suggests that every flame, whether in the sky or the soul, moves through a cycle, kindling, glow, softening, and rest. The ember does not vanish when it dims. It simply waits, gathering quiet strength for the next rise. It is said that those who understood the final passages would close the manuscript gently, never with haste. They would extinguish the candle not with breath, but with a slow lowering of the hand, letting the darkness settle like a shawl around their shoulders. They believed wisdom was a visitor, not a possession. One welcomes it, listens, and lets it depart without grasping. And now, as the candle beside the codex trembles, its flame bending first to one side, then the other, the room grows softer. Shadows stretch across the walls like long-forgotten memories, returning from sleep. The manuscript glows faintly in the fading light, its symbols warm one moment, dim the next. It feels less like a book and more like a breathing presence, an ember held between worlds. Perhaps it was never meant to be fully understood. Perhaps its purpose is not to reveal, but to accompany. The candle burns lower, and the shrine drifts once more towards silence. The teachings of breath and flame linger in the air, fragile as dust, luminous as starlight. And in this quiet, as the last flicker dances along the edge of the page, we sense that knowledge, like fire, like breath, is never truly lost. It glows, fades, and returns, a quiet ember in the dark, waiting for the moment when the world is ready to listen again. The observatory that watched the tides of heaven. It is said that on nights when the sea forgot its voice, when the waves softened into long silvery breaths, the cliffside observatory at the edge of the world would open its shuttered windows and listen. Not to the ocean below, nor to the wind that trailed its cool fingers along the broken stones, but to something far more distant, far more ancient. Something that shimmered softly in the hush between stars. Tonight, the stone walkway feels cold beneath the wandering moon, and the old observatory waits like a patient sentinel. Its dome, cracked by seasons and salted air, still leans toward the sky as though craving some forgotten whisper. And perhaps, in a way only ruins understand, it remembers. Beneath the silence, as an invitation stirs. Picture a lonely cliff, carved by centuries of wind, where the world narrows into a single breath between two endless realms, the churning sea below and the pale breathing sky above. At the very edge of this precipice stands the observatory, its walls worn smooth by storms, its windows clouded with dust like half-closed eyes. Some believe the astronomers built it here because the horizon dissolved so perfectly that one could not always tell where the waters ended and the heavens began. At twilight, the two realms merged, sky drifting downward like a curtain of mist, sea lifting upward like a softened mirror. It was a place where boundaries blurred, where sight slipped toward wonder. And in that blurring, the ancient star watchers felt close to something they could not name. Inside, the first chamber glows faintly with reflected moonlight. Crumbled manuscripts sleep on stone tables, their curled edges trembling as if stirred by a memory rather than wind. Dust dances in the dimness like miniature constellations. The air tastes of salt and old ink, and the faint smell of oil once used to polish brass astrolabes lingers like a ghost of labor long stilled. A quiet awe gathers around the threshold, as though the room itself hums with a forgotten devotion. Whispers tell us that the astronomers who lived here were unlike others of their age. While most sought patterns in the heavens, maps for travelers, omens for kings, these solitary watchers followed another belief entirely. They claimed that the sky did not simply turn in majestic circles, nor did the stars merely drift along ancient paths. They believed the heavens moved like tides, slow, rhythmic, breathing in cycles too vast for a single lifetime to witness. Where memory fades, fragments remain. Carved into the stone corridor are spirals, their lines widening and tightening like the pull of unseen forces. They resemble ocean currents frozen into rock, or perhaps the whirls of distant galaxies sketched by hands that understood more than they could speak. Walk deeper, and the corridor narrows. Shadows fold around you like soft robes once worn by patient scholars. You feel, almost instinctively, that each footfall touches the same stones those long-ago watchers once crossed. Footsteps that never hurried, never clattered, for their work required reverence. In a side chamber, a collapsed table reveals a collection of strange objects. Pearlescent stones etched with star-marked symbols. Lengths of polished driftwood arranged in measuring lines. Fragments of glass lenses still faintly tinted with dusk blue. These relics suggest a blending of worlds, sea and sky, tide and constellation, joined by minds that refuse to separate what nature wove together. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Farther in, a large circular room opens like the inside of a seashell, its walls curving gently upward. Here, the ceiling once held a great rotating disc, used to track celestial rhythms. Though half broken, the mechanism still hints at its former grace. The gears bear the same spiral patterns seen along the corridor, as though the entire observatory pulsed to the same quiet rhythm. It is said that during certain nights when the moon was marked by the tide, as they would whisper, the disk aligned perfectly with the horizon. In that alignment, the watchers believed they could glimpse the rising and falling of the heaven's great breath. Not merely stars drifting, but stars responding. Outside the observatory's narrow windows, the shoreline stretches into a silvered distance. The tide glides inward, patient and slow, like an echo of something above. Some of the ancient records speak of nights when the sea seemed to pulse in harmony with constellations, when a certain star brightened just as a certain wave crested, or when the moon dipped low as the waters withdrew. To the star watchers, these were not coincidences, they were messages. Yet much of their writing remains cryptic. Fragments carved into stone tablets bear phrases like, "The deep sky shifts," or "When the heavens bow, the waters listen." Were these poetic descriptions? Observations? Rituals? Even the most meticulous historians cannot say. Whispers tell us that the astronomers viewed themselves not as observers, but as translators. interpreters of a dialogue playing out between sky and sea. A dialogue now half lost. In another chamber, you find a tall, narrow window, shaped like a standing wave. Moonlight spills through it, illuminating a series of inscriptions on the floor. These markings, arranged like concentric ripples, glow faintly as if responding to the night itself. Perhaps minerals embedded in the stone catch the light. Perhaps something more ancient glimmers beneath the surface. The air grows quieter. Even the sea below seems to pause. Some believe the astronomers gathered here at the deepest hour of night, laying their hands on the rippled floor, listening, not for the ocean's voice, but for the subtle trembling in the stones, the delicate shiver of the earth responding to celestial pull. Imagine them sitting in a circle, cloaked in sleep-softened fabrics, faces lit only by moonbeams sliding across polished instruments. They would breathe slowly, matching their rhythm to the distant pulse they sought to understand. And perhaps they felt something. A faint rising, a faint falling, like the resting breath of a giant whose dreams shape the world. As the chapter reaches its final stretch, the observatory begins to feel less like a ruin and more like a memory. Each room holds a quiet melancholy, the kind that lingers after something beloved has slipped beyond reach. And yet, these stones do not mourn. They simply wait. They observe. They continue to hold the sky with gentle patience, as though confident that all returns in time. In the final chamber, once the heart of the observatory, you find a wide window facing the horizon. Its glass, cracked and dim, still reflects the trembling sky. The stars shimmer across its surface like distant thoughts drifting through a half-forgotten dream. Beneath the silence of the night, you sense the echo of what once occurred here. The quiet arrival of stargazers seeking patterns in infinity, tracing the slow rise and fall of hidden celestial tides. Their hands shaped the instruments, their breath fogged the lenses, their devotion carved spirals into the floor. And though they are gone, the observatory has not abandoned its purpose. It still watches. The sea below murmurs rhythmically, lifting and lowering in a slow, ancient pulse. The stars above appear to shimmer in gentle reply. Whether the watchers misunderstood or glimpsed some deeper truth may never be known. Perhaps it was never meant to be known. The room grows softer. The air cools. The sea merges again with the sky. And the observatory, weathered yet unbroken, gazes outward with the calm of one who loved deeply and remembers quietly. Before you leave, you take one last look through the cracked window pane. The horizon trembles, just slightly, as though breathing, and in that trembling, the old structure seems almost to smile. Perhaps it is simply moonlight on glass. Perhaps it is something else. But as you turn away, a gentle thought lingers. Even abandoned places remember what they once adored. And some truths, drifting softly between sky and sea, wait for dreamers rather than scholars. Where memory fades, the stars continue their slow tidal whisper, and the observatory listens still. The star-marked pilgrims of the Northern Road. It is said that in the far reaches of the world, where the wind carries the scent of frozen rivers and old, unspoken prayers, there lies a path few living souls now remember. It winds through valleys touched by frost, through silence deep enough to feel like an ancient presence, through shadows that fall in long silver strokes across the earth. And along this path, scattered like forgotten offerings, rest the waystones, pale, smooth, each carved with a single star. They rise from the ground like fingers of memory, shaped by devotion rather than time, their surfaces worn to a gentle sheen by centuries of passing palms. Whispers tell us that when the moon hangs low, the stars etched into these stones seem to glow faintly, as though responding to some far-off celestial call. In forgotten corners of the earth, travelers still speak of them in hushed voices, as if mentioning their light too boldly might disturb whatever sleeps beneath the valley's frozen breath. Our story begins there, not with movement, but with stillness, with a single star-marked stone leaning gently against a ridge of windswept frost, half buried yet unmistakably deliberate. It stands like an invitation, or perhaps a question, framed by the muted glow of northern dawn. Beyond it, the path stretches forward in a long arc, fading into a horizon soft with crystalline mist. One could almost imagine distant footsteps still echoing just beyond hearing. For this was the Northern Road, a road not taken for urgency, nor for conquest, nor for trade. It was walked slowly, reverently, like a prayer stretched across miles. Those who followed it were not seekers of kingdoms or treasures. They were pilgrims of the sky, humble wanderers who believed that if they walked far enough, long enough, gently enough, their spirits would align with the constellations that watched over them from the heavens. Every step was a quiet offering, every breath a vow made without words. In the old texts, the pilgrims are described simply as the star-marked. No names survive, no individual stories, only fragments scattered among scrolls, etched into tablets, whispered by fireside in winter lodges where the cold pressed against the walls like a living thing. Some believe the star-marked came from coastal settlements. Others say mountain monasteries. Others that they were born among nomadic families who followed the migrations of light across the seasons. But no claim is certain. The truth drifts like snow across centuries, settling where it will. What is known, or at least what is spoken, is that these pilgrims carried small mirrors fashioned from polished stone or thin sheets of frost-hardened metal. Their purpose was tender, mysterious, almost ceremonial. When the night sky cleared, they would lift these mirrors to catch the starlight, tilting them carefully to direct that trembling glow into hidden shrines recessed along the path. Some shrines were no larger than a small alcove in a cliff face. Others were carved deep into the sides of hills, their entrances veiled by curtains of ice. And some, shrouded by snow, could only be found by those who knew the secret constellations etched upon the waystones. It is said that when starlight touched those shrines, a soft resonance could be heard. A tone so delicate, it felt more like a memory than a sound. The pilgrims believed this resonance to be the breath of the valley itself, stirred awake by celestial reflection. To them, the valley was not merely landscape. It was a listening presence, ancient and aware, shaped by the same forces that kindled the stars. And so, they walked the northern road in quiet devotion. Slow steps, measured breaths. Their journey was not one of pursuit, but of alignment. They followed the constellations like lanterns in the sky, trusting that where the heavens pointed was where their spirits must drift. They did not seek endpoints or answers, nor did they carry burdens of wealth or legacy. Their offering was their presence, their patience, their willingness to wander without seeking closure. Beneath the silence of the valley, their path unfolded like a whisper. Frosted grass bowed under their passing, as though acknowledging a lineage older than kingdoms. The wind threaded through the canyons in long sonorous notes, curling around the waystones like a guardian spirit. Sometimes, when the northern lights unfurled above them in dreaming waves of green and copper, the pilgrims would pause and hold their mirrors aloft, catching hints of that shifting radiance. Not to capture it, for such light cannot be held, but simply to honor it. Yet the northern road holds contradictions, as all ancient things do. Some stories claim the pilgrims walked for a single season before returning home with quiet hearts. Others say they traveled endlessly, never marking the seasons, following the sky with gentle determination until their bodies could walk no further. And then there are the oldest tales, the ones spoken only when the fire has burned low and the night seems deeper than the world itself. Those tales claim the pilgrims did not return at all. According to these whispers, the star-marked vanished into the night sky, their forms dissolving like breath on glass. Some say they were taken up by the constellations they followed so faithfully. Others that they stepped through a threshold only visible to those who walked without desire. A few texts speak of a night when the stars themselves seem to move, rearranging into patterns no scholar has ever deciphered. Patterns that mirrored the placement of the hidden shrines along the path. Perhaps the valley was not merely a place of passage, but a bridge, a quiet crossing between earth and sky. As we imagine their final footsteps, the valley around them remains unchanged. Frost still glitters like powdered starlight. Ancient stones still lean beneath layers of snow, their carved stars catching the faintest hints of moonlight. The northern wind still hums with its low, steady voice, brushing against the old shrines with the gentlest of touches. Nothing marks their departure but silence, a deeper silence than before. Like the moment after a candle is extinguished and the air still holds the memory of its light. Where memory fades, so too does certainty, but uncertainty is its own kind of wonder. And the valley thrives on such quiet questions. Some say the northern road is still there, beneath the frost and drifting snow, waiting for those who walk not with urgency, but with openness, a path that cannot be found when sought directly, but reveals itself when one moves with the rhythm of breath, the gentleness of dawn, the patience of stars. Others believe the waystones continue to shift, rising and sinking with the seasons, marking a route that aligns with constellations only on certain nights of the year. Perhaps the pilgrims understood this shifting. Perhaps they knew how to read the celestial dance. Or perhaps they simply trusted that the road would guide them where they needed to be. Not in a world, but within themselves. Beneath the silence of ages, the valley exhales. Its breath drifts upward in a faint mist, curling around the old stones as though welcoming memory home. The shrines wait. The frost listens. The sky, vast and unending, continues its slow turning. And somewhere within that turning, the footsteps of the star-marked still echo. Faint, distant, like a half-forgotten lullaby carried on the northern wind. perhaps the pilgrims never vanished. Perhaps they simply stepped into a kind of presence too subtle for most to perceive. A place where devotion becomes illumination, where the boundary between earth and sky softens into a single shimmering veil. Perhaps the valley still remembers them. Perhaps the stars do too. Or perhaps, as some quiet voices say when the night grows deep, the pilgrims were never meant to be found at all. Their journey was not one of arrival, but of gentle dissolution, a surrender to the vastness of the universe, to the serenity of wandering without end. And so the chapter closes like a slow-falling snowflake, soft and weightless, drifting into silence as the frozen valley breathes out one last memory beneath the eternal northern glow. The relic that held the shadow of a star in forgotten corners of the earth, where sound travels slowly and silence becomes a kind of drifting incense. There lies a cavern carved not by hands, but by patience. Its walls glimmer faintly with mineral dust, like the remnants of a long-extinguished constellation settling upon stone. And at the very heart of this hollow sanctuary, raised upon a simple pedestal of smoothed granite, rests a solitary artifact, a polished sphere, dark as an eclipse, smooth as water stilled by moonlight, silent as a prayer whispered too softly for the world to hear. It is said that the sphere contains the shadow of a vanished star, a thing that should not exist, for what casts a shadow upon the infinite sky? What form could darkness take when born from light itself? But there it rests, unmoving, unchanging, as though guarding the last breath of something cosmic and long departed. Visitors who stumbled upon it, wanderers, seekers, those who followed rumors more delicate than smoke, described an uncanny feeling when standing before it. Not fear nor awe but a gentle hum beneath the ribs, like the memory of a lullaby heard in childhood. Some saw that the sphere absorbed nearby light ever so slightly, as though drinking it. Others felt as if it pulsed, not visibly, but in the way a sleeping creature shifts its breath. Wordsworth tell us that those who lingered too long would see faint glimmers move across the sphere's surface, like distant starlight attempting to find its way home. And when the cavern breathed, expanding and contracting with the cooling earth, they believed the relic was breathing with it. No one knew how it arrived here. No one knew who placed it. Yet the cavern, the pedestal, and the sphere felt arranged, intentionally, reverently, like a shrine waiting for a forgotten ceremony to begin. Somewhere beneath this silence, the story stirs. It is said that in the age before records were written in clay and stone, people believed the heavens held not only brilliance, but memory. That every star possessed two natures, one that shone outward into the night, and one that folded inward, storing echoes of all it had witnessed across eternity. A dual being, light and echo, fire and reflection, radiance and shadow. To the ancient priests who lived along the windswept plateaus north of the Silver Coast, stars were not merely celestial lanterns. They were watchers, keepers of stories older than the Earth's first mountain, silent guardians who marked the rise and fall of forgotten kingdoms. These priests, draped in garments stitched with spiral patterns meant to mimic constellations, carried the relic through nocturnal rites when the sky was clearest. It was said that under starlight, the sphere awakened, revealing faint streaks or drifting shapes across its surface. These movements were interpreted as omens, warnings of shifting seasons, distant storms, or cosmic alignments that foretold change. But even then, the priests debated the relic's true nature. Some believed it was the cooled heart of a fallen star, a celestial ember that landed upon Earth long before any human drew breath. Others insisted it was crafted not by nature, but by ancient hands, shaped as a symbolic vessel of cosmic memory. And a few, in low whispers around sacred fires, murmured of beings who walked between worlds, star-born visitors who left behind tools to guide humanity's earliest steps. No tale ever settled into certainty. The sphere remained the same, silent, polished, unfathomable. Among the stories woven around this relic, none is repeated as often as the tale of the vanished star. It begins with a night when the sky trembled. Birds fell silent. Wind paused as though listening. And in the deep hours before dawn, one star, a bright, steady presence that generations had used to guide their travels and rituals, flickered, then dimmed, then faded, until its place in the heavens was nothing more than an empty pocket of night. People gathered in terraces and hilltops, whispering in confusion. No star had simply disappeared before. Some cried out, believing it an omen of ruin. Others felt no fear at all, only a gentle ache, like losing a familiar voice. The priest carried the sphere to the highest cliff overlooking the coast, seeking answers in its dark reflection. They claimed that on that night, for the first and only time, the relic glowed faintly, not with light, but with a shifting softness resembling a breath. It was as though the relic had received something, a final echo, a final memory, or perhaps, as dreamers suggest, the star had passed its shadow into the sphere, leaving behind its brilliance elsewhere, beyond any mortal sky. What truly became of that star remains veiled in the dust of ages. But the sphere, from that night onward, was treated not as an artifact, but as a reliquary holding the last trace of something precious. Those who lived close to the cavern practiced a quiet ritual whenever they approached the relic. No torches, no music, only silence. They would enter barefoot, feeling the cool stone beneath them. Some brought scrolls inscribed with star maps, their inked spirals marking celestial pathways. Others carried offerings: a feather, a polished pebble, a fragment of copper. Small tokens meant to honor not the sphere itself, but the mystery it contained. In these ceremonies, no words were spoken. It was believed that stars, especially lost ones, listened not to speech, but to breath. So visitors simply breathed, slowly, reverently, inhaling the ancient air, exhaling into the space around the relic, offering a part of themselves to the silence. Some claimed the sphere responded, absorbing their breath as though feeding on the gentle warmth of their presence. Others said it grew slightly warmer or colder, depending on the season. Most felt nothing, yet they left softened, as if touched by a memory or older than their own life. A memory not theirs, but not unfamiliar. Some scholars in later centuries dismissed the sphere as nothing more than polished obsidian. They argued that its legends formed only because the human mind longs to attach meaning to mystery. They called it a symbol, not a cosmic relic, and perhaps they were right. Perhaps it was carved by human hands, shaped with intention, but devoid of celestial heritage. Yet, if that were true, one must still explain the unshakable reverence it inspired. Why did the ancient priests choose this object above all others? Why did travelers speak of strange comfort in its presence? Why did the caverns seem arranged for it? Like a temple designed around a single idea. Sometimes symbols hold more power than facts. Sometimes belief is the breath that animates an object into significance. The sphere, literal or not, became a container of humanity's longing to understand the sky. A yearning woven into every myth we tell about stars, origins, and destinies written in light. As time drifted forward, myths clung to the relic, like dust settling upon untouched stone. There were tales of celestial visitors who descended in spirals of light, leaving behind knowledge encoded within smooth, dark spheres. These beings, it was said, walked among early humans, teaching them to read the heavens, to interpret eclipses, to sense the shifting tone of the night. Other stories insisted the sphere was a warning, a reminder that stars like kingdoms can vanish without sound, without farewell, a lesson in impermanence. And still others whispered that one day the star might return, recognized not by light, but by the shadow sealed within the sphere, awakening it from its ancient stillness. Generations layered their hopes, their fears, their dreams around the relic, until it became less a physical object and more a mirror for the human soul, reflecting the longing that rises whenever we look upward and wonder what lies beyond our small horizon. Today, the cavern is empty of worshippers and priests. The scrolls have crumbled. The plateaus are quiet, but the sphere remains, still, unbroken, patient. Its surface catches the faintest touch of light, torchlight, moonlight, even the dim shimmer of bioluminescent insects that drift through the cavern at night. And though the light appears to slide across it, some say it moves differently, as though guided by an inner rhythm. Perhaps this is illusion. Perhaps it is simply the mind trying to remember stories told long ago. Or perhaps, beneath the silence, the sphere still hums with the echo of a star that once breathed fire across the sky. In these soft hours, as your thoughts drift towards sleep, imagine the sphere resting in its cavern of quiet stone. Imagine running a finger along its surface, finding it cool, impossibly smooth, almost alive. Imagine the faint shimmer that dances across it, a shimmer that seems to shift even when your eyes are still. Some believe the star's shadow still stirs inside, waiting for a listener gentle enough to hear what cannot be spoken. Perhaps it was never meant to be understood. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And so the relic sits, breathing softly in the dark, holding the memory of a cosmos older than our oldest dreams, where memory fades, where silence thickens, where light becomes shadow and shadow becomes story. There the sphere endures, a quiet heartbeat in the depths of stone, a whisper from a star that once lived, and maybe still does, somewhere beyond the edges of night. The garden where constellations took root, it is said that somewhere beyond the borders of remembered kingdoms, past the last hills where shepherd fires once flickered, there lies a sanctuary whose name has been swallowed by time. Travelers who speak of it do so in murmurs, as though the very syllables might crumble into dust between their lips. They call it simply the garden where constellations took root, a place where the earth breathed in the language of the stars, and the stars, for a brief, soft moment in eternity, leaned down to answer. Whispers tell us that the approach begins not with a gate nor a road, but with an opening in the night itself. It appears as a faint silver seam threading between two silent cliffs. Step through that seam, they say, and one finds oneself beneath an open sky so vast and unmarred that it seems almost new, as though dawn has not yet learned the shape of the horizon. There, in the hush of this forgotten clearing, lies the sanctuary. At first, it is only a suggestion, a curve of stone half buried by creeping vines, a glimmer of water reflecting moonlight, a scent of something sweet rising from hidden petals. But as the eyes soften, not strain, not search, but loosen like someone sinking into sleep, shapes begin to emerge. Paths unfurl like celestial arcs across the ground, each designed to mirror a piece of the heavens above. Pools rest beneath overhanging branches, their surfaces trembling with reflections of constellations that shift ever so slightly with the breeze. And along the edges of every path blossom plants that open only when the sky dims, flowers that breathe out colors not quite imaginable in the daylight. This garden, ancient stories insist, was shaped by caretakers whose names have long been lost. They were cultivators of earth, but also listeners of the sky, tending both soil and starlight. They believed the heavens carried the patterns of harmony, and that by arranging the land in those same sacred designs, they could invite balance to take root upon the world. Some believe these caretakers were not gardeners in the way we know them, but something gentler, something older, spirits perhaps, or echoing memories of the constellations themselves, coaxing the earth to bloom in the image of cosmic order. Others say they were simply quiet people, more attentive than the rest of us, who understood that beauty becomes eternal only when it reflects something larger than itself. In forgotten corners of the earth, stories like these cling to the edges of truth, neither fully myth nor fully memory. It is said that the sanctuary was not meant to be entered with haste. The land welcomed only those who approached in silence, with their heartbeats slowed to match the rhythm of the dusk. For in this place, every stone, every petal, every breath of a wind was part of a vast celestial script. A script that unraveled not through words or revelations, but through sensation. Beneath the silence of the garden, paths curved like the tails of comets, looping gently through clusters of fragrant blossoms. Some blossoms exhaled faint dusts of silver, others shimmered with pale gold veins, like threads of starlight captured in living form. Pools gathered at the ends of these paths, formed not by accident but by design. They mirrored specific constellations above so perfectly that the sky seemed to exist twice, once in the heavens and once in the quiet water below. There were those who came seeking guidance, though the garden offered nothing in the way of ordinary answers. Instead, those who visited learned to recline upon the soft moss between the star-aligned flowers. They watched the sky and its reflection together, allowing the two worlds to merge into one. They breathed slowly, gently, until their thoughts loosened from the day's concerns, drifting like dust caught in a beam of moonlight. And in that drift, they sensed harmony, not as revelation, but as resonance, a tide meeting another tide. It is said that if one lay long enough among the living constellations, the body seemed to blur at its edges, dissolving into the perfume of blossoms and the cool whisper of night air. Those who returned from such rest often described the experience in hesitant, delicate phrases. A thought that was not quite a thought, a silence that spoke, a feeling of being held by something both vast and kind. None claimed to understand the garden fully, for perhaps understanding was never the purpose. Night after night, the sanctuary bloomed and dimmed, following a rhythm older than any kingdom carved into stone. The caretakers would rearrange certain petals, shift the curve of a walkway, or adjust a pool's position by a measure no wider than a fingertip. These changes were subtle, almost invisible, yet crucial, for the sky itself moved, and the garden was meant to move with it. Harmony, after all, does not stand still. Some legends tell that there was once a scroll buried somewhere within the sanctuary, written in a script no longer spoken. It was said to explain the original intent behind every curve, every planting, every shimmering pool. But if such a scroll ever existed, no trace remains. Perhaps it was never meant to survive. Perhaps its purpose was fulfilled the moment the garden bloomed. Or perhaps, as some of the old wanderers insist, it was not meant for human eyes at all. Beneath the canopy of this ancient place, time behaved strangely. Leaves did not fall so quickly. Water did not ripple unless touched by the night wind. Even the stars seemed steadier, holding their positions as though pausing to gaze down into their own reflections. A gentle echo lingered in the air. Not a sound, precisely, but a presence. Some travelers described it as the echo of old prayers. Others believed it was the voice of the earth listening to the sky. Yet amid all the sanctuary's quiet beauty, a soft uncertainty curled through the stories. For not all agreed that humans were ever meant to walk these paths. Whispers tell that the sanctuary was shaped not for people, but for the guardians of dusk, beings who watched the threshold between day and night, ensuring the two realms remained in balance. According to this belief, the garden existed long before life learned to walk upon soil, long before breath filled the lungs of the first wandering creature. It was a gift from the stars to the earth, a way of anchoring celestial order into the shifting cradle of the world below. If this is true, then humans who entered the garden did so as guests. Gentle intruders welcomed only so long as they walked with reverence. The caretakers, whether earthly or otherworldly, continued their quiet tending, ensuring the patterns never frayed, that earth continued to echo sky. Some say the guardians would glide through the sanctuary unseen. Their presence felt only as a soft brush of wind, or the sudden bloom of a petal. Others speak of shapes glimpsed in the reflection of the pools, faint, shimmering forms that disappeared when one blinked. But perhaps these are only stories told by those who wish to believe they had touched something sacred. Where memory fades, stories often take root. And so the garden, veiled in myth, stands between the realms of knowing and dreaming. A place both real and unreal, both fragile and eternal. A place shaped by constellations and cultivated by hands lost to history. As nights passed into centuries, and centuries into dust, fewer and fewer travelers found their way to the sanctuary. Paths shifted, hills grew taller. The silver seam that once marked the entry thinned into obscurity. But the garden remained, as gardens shaped by stars often do, breathing softly beneath the moon, its petals opening and closing with the turning of the sky. Even now, it is said that when the world grows quiet enough, a faint glow may be seen on the horizon, like starlight settling upon distant leaves. Some believe it is the sanctuary, calling to those whose hearts are ready for silence. Others think it is merely the moonlight brushing over forgotten stones. Perhaps both are true. Perhaps neither. What is certain is this: the garden once existed in a delicate balance between earth and sky, between the known and the unknowable. And though its paths may be hidden, its essence lingers in the spaces where stillness gathers, in the pause before sleep, in the hush of a slow-breathing night, in the quiet longing to belong to something larger than oneself. As the moon climbs higher, its beams slip across the sanctuary's petals, illuminating their silent faces with soft silver. Pools shimmer with constellations both ancient and newborn. Blossoms sigh open in gentle spirals. And for a brief moment, the world seems to hold its breath, caught between realms. Some voices, they tell us, only echo when we are ready to listen. And perhaps the garden was never meant to be found, but remembered. Not with the mind, but with the part of the soul that stirs when the stars rise and dreams take root. The song the night would not forget. It is said that in forgotten ages, when the sky hung lower and the stars shone with a clarity now lost to the world, there existed a valley where sound learned to linger. Not as an echo, not as a memory, but as something deeper, something living. Beneath that ancient canopy of constellations, a single song once rose, weaving through the darkness like a thin ribbon of silver breath. And though centuries have washed across the land like slow-moving tides of dust, whispers tell us the night has not forgotten it. The valley itself lies hidden where mountain shadows gather, a quiet cradle between stone giants worn smooth by time. Some believe the valley was carved not by water or ice, but by the very resonance of the song itself, an imprint left by a melody so pure it etched its shape into the earth. No scroll remains to chart its origin. No ink survives to name its creator. What remains is only the question that drifts like mist at the valley floor. What melody could endure through centuries of silence? It is a gentle question, but it opens the heart the way a dusk breeze opens the door of an abandoned shrine, softly, reverently, with the patience of a world that has no need for haste. Those who lived in the valley long before, written in memory, treated music not as an art, but as a threshold. They believed each note was a fragile bridge spanning the distance between mortal breath and celestial origin. To sing was to lift a thread into the night. To weave harmony was to bind the soul to the quiet laws that govern the turning of the stars. It is said their gatherings were less like celebrations and more like rituals. Slow circles of torchlight, drifting incense, shadows swaying like tides along rock walls, marked by spirals and star symbols. Voices rose not for pleasure, but for alignment, each tone meant to echo the larger hidden rhythms beneath creation itself. Whispers tell us the people of the valley understood something we no longer remember. That sound was a form of memory, older than words, older than stone, older than the very mountains surrounding them. They believed music had its own kind of lineage, its own ancestry, and that every melody was the child of another melody, stretched across cosmic time. In their eyes, to sing was not to create, but to reveal, to unearth something buried, veiled, waiting. Their evenings were slow drifting, carried on the breath of wind moving through cedar branches. When the moon rose, marked by the moon, as they would say, families gathered along the valley's central clearing, a bowl of soft earth ringed with ancient stone. A stream wound through the gathering place like a silver thread, its quiet murmur blending with the gentle hum of night insects. Here, under starlight that shimmered like distant bells, voices gathered. Not many, just enough to hold the night with tenderness. The way they sang is difficult for us to imagine, for their music was not bound by scale or rhythm as we know them. It was a drifting sound, a slow unfolding that mirrored the unhurried breath of the earth itself. Notes did not move, they appeared. They emerged from the air like tiny lanterns rising from unseen hands. And the people did not push their voices into the world. They offered them. Each tone fell into the valley like a soft pebble dropped in water, sending ripples that touched the mountain's stone ribs. Some elders carried small sacred instruments, hollow frames of faded copper, star-etched and worn smooth by years of handling. Others used nothing at all, only breath and a long awareness of silence. It was the silence, they claimed, that shaped the song. Beneath the silence, their rites proclaimed, the truth waits. And so the song rose. It rose between the trees. It rose into the moonlit terraces. It rose through the stones etched with spirals, some so old their origins had long dissolved into dust. The melody drifted upward like a thin thread, trying to stitch sky and earth back together. Those present felt the air change. The valley grew still. Even the small night animals paused, as if listening or remembering. Some believed that when the song reached its fullest shape, the stars themselves leaned closer. They said the constellations brightened, as though touched by a faint, familiar longing. Others whispered that the earth beneath them vibrated, pulsing lightly through the soles of their feet. What all agreed upon was simple. Something answered. It was never loud, never sudden. More like a soft returning echo that was not truly an echo. A vibration that was neither sound nor silence. A presence. A reminder that the song was not entirely theirs. Over generations, the people came to feel that this melody belonged not to them, but to the valley itself. They merely awakened it, borrowing it briefly before letting it settle back into the land's deep chambers. And when the old gatherings dwindled, when the winds shifted, when migrations began, when ruins took the place of living structures, when scrolls crumbled and maps turned to ash, the song returned to the valley's inner quiet. But it did not vanish. Where memory fades, the earth remembers. Time, in its slow benevolence, covered the valley in layers of soil and lichen. New trees grew along the slopes. Moss crept over the stones that once marked the gathering place. The star-etched instruments corroded into ghost shapes beneath the earth. Seasons blended, centuries drifted. And yet the valley remained as it had always been, a listening bowl, a place shaped by resonance. Travelers who pass through the region now speak of the valley with a soft hesitation. Most do not stay long. Something in the air feels too aware, too patient. But on still nights, when the sky clears and the moon walks gently across the mountains, some swear they hear a faint tone drifting through the dark. Not loud, not clear, as though it moves through deep water. A lingering vibration, a thin silver thread drawn through silence. Not a melody, no shape, no pattern, just a suggestion of one. A reminder of something that once breathed with the night. There are those who believe the sound is only the wind moving through old stone hollows. Others think it is the echo of distant animals or shifting earth. But there are a few, quiet scholars, wandering mystics, dream-heavy listeners, who lean into the possibility that the valley still remembers the song. That memory, like music, has its own way of enduring. They speak softly of resonance trapped in stone pores, of ancient vibrations, repeating themselves in cycles far longer than a human life. They say the night carries the song not as a performance, but as a keepsake, a secret folded carefully under its dark wing. Perhaps it is so, perhaps not. What matters is the feeling that settles over anyone who lingers long enough to listen. A gentle ache, a quiet yearning, as if the valley is calling something forward. Not a sound, but the memory of one. A memory so older than the listener, older than the stones, bolder than the valley itself. And in that ache lies the heart of the story. A longing to hear something lost. A longing to understand what could have been so beautiful that the night itself refused to let it fade. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Some melodies return only in the softest hours. And some songs, those born of breath, earth, and starlight, do not need to survive in memory to endure. They live instead in the hidden chambers beneath silence, in the quiet folds of the world where time moves differently, gently, like a slow tide against forgotten shores. They wait for those who listen not with their ears, but with the quiet places of their spirit. And so the chapter closes with this soft reflection. Perhaps the valley's song was never meant to be preserved in scroll or stone. Perhaps its beauty was always in its impermanence, in the way it rose once, perfectly, under a canopy of ancient stars, and in the way its resonance still hums faintly in the night, like a breath the world refuses to release. Some songs may not survive in memory, but beneath the silence, where the earth remembers, the night does not forget.